Luigi Eladdo was the nephew through marriage of Francesco Madonia, boss of Rezutana, and considered one of Totorini's closest allies. In fact, during the early 1980s, when the Coglianesi unleashed their attack on the bosses in Palermo, Madonia's sons, Salvatore and Antonio, carried out numerous murders on behalf of the Coglianesi. Madonia's other son, Giuseppe, would succeed him as boss, and at one time he was identified as the number 2 leading boss of the Sicilian mafia. He would be arrested in September 1992 and accused of several murders, including the deaths of prosecuting magistrates Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, and ultimately received a life sentence. Yet despite being incarcerated in the strict 41 bis unit, he managed to run his family through visits with the Sister Maria, who would pass coded messages to members on the outside, including Bernardo Provenzano, a leading Coglianesi boss. Eladdo, at a young age, became the driver for his uncle, Madonia, and would eventually become a member of the Sicilian mafia. In 1983, he was arrested at an airport in Rome while boarding an Alitalia flight. His charges were mafia association, and he received a 17-year sentence. Subsequently, that sentence was reduced, and he served it in prisons in Puglia, Genoa, and Messina. And after spending more than a decade in prison, Eladdo came home to a violent upheaval and transition of the mafia, one intensified by its conflict with the state. In 1992, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino killed in separate bombings. In January 1993, Totorina, the leading Coglianesi boss, was captured after 23 years spent as a fugitive. In that same year, the mafia launched a terror campaign to pressure the state with 3 separate bombings in Florence, Milan, and Rome, killing 10 people and injuring many others. So sensing everything that was going on, Eladdo decided to begin his journey of redemption. My name is Luigi Eladdo, and I have decided to cooperate with the law. Cosa Nostra has become nothing but a killing machine. He said these words to Carabinieri Colonel Michele Rizzo, who was chosen to be his contact person with law enforcement. But it was decided to use Eladdo as a confidential informant, where he would provide real-time information regarding the Coglianesi and the Sicilian mafia. With Eladdo's information, law enforcement was able to make somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 arrests. Following Totorina's capture, the Coglianesi was being led by his brother-in-law, Leo Luca Bagarella, up until his arrest in June of 1995, at which time Bernardo Provenzano took the reins. Provenzano had also been a fugitive since September 1963 after being accused of eliminating members of a family of the former boss, Michele Navarro. Eladdo and the colonel had code names for one another. The colonel's was Bruno, and Eladdo's was Fonte Oriente, which translates to Source East. His information also led to the arrest of members who were fugitives and were captured as a result, and the mafia's undercover dealings with the state and politicians, as well as their alliance to the Freemasons, which according to Eladdo took place in the early 80s. By 1995, Provenzano had been a fugitive from justice for 32 years. Was the authorities actively looking for him? That's up for debate. Nonetheless, he was considered one of Italy's top most wanted fugitives. On October 29, 1995, Eladdo told the colonel about an arranged meeting that was to take place the following day between 2 members and himself with Provenzano. The colonel took this information back to his superiors, one being General Mario Mori, who suggested they equip Eladdo with a sort of tracking device, an idea that the colonel shot down. He requested only surveillance and photographs aimed at documenting the meeting. Supposedly, during his talk with Mori, the colonel only referred to his source as Oriente, never mentioning his name. The colonel's report on what took place on October 30th, 1995 is as follows. At 7:55 a.m., 2 cars arrived at the place of interest, the Mezzorusso crossroads. 2 people exited the cars, one elderly and one young. At 8:05, an older Ford Escort arrived and picked the 2 men up and drove away towards Agrigento. Tailing the car was not carried out due to the countermeasures taken. At 8:20, the driver of the Ford stopped next to a Lancia Prisma, and after a few minutes, they both continued towards Agrigento. The colonel met with Eladdo later that night at 11 p.m. where Eladdo reported meeting with Provenzano personally early in the farmhouse, which was along a dirt road near Mezzoiuso. That meeting lasted 8 hours, where they discussed Cosa Nostra business. Despite this detailed information, including an exact location, no wiretaps were put in place or were any raids carried out at the farmhouse. Things took a turn for the worst when a court requested that Eladdo return to prison. During his incarceration, he would go back and forth from prison due to medical issues, including a heart attack, and apparently had about 6 months left to serve. Colonel Rizzo put in a request with the court in Caltanissetta to transfer Eladdo's documents away from the courts in Genoa and Messina, who were unaware of his cooperation for the past 2 years. These documents were ultimately handed over to a Captain Damiano, who allegedly placed them in the hands of Maria Stella Madonia, the sister of Giuseppe Madonia mentioned earlier. Prior to this, Madonia, still in prison, and Provenzano were highly suspicious at all the high-profile arrests that were taking place. On the night of May 10, 1996, Luigi Eladdo traveled home to Catania, Sicily, and around 8:35 p.m., he exited his car and went to retrieve something from the trunk when a motorcycle pulled up with 2 men, both of whom fired at him. Eladdo fell to the ground and died as a result of his injuries. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and give it a like, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Anyone who'd like to show their appreciation for videos like this, or help me continue making them, can donate with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me mention my blog, also called Sit Down News, especially for those of you who still enjoy reading. It can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. Prior to the murder, several notes were sent by Provenzano to Giovanni Brusca and Antonino Giuffre, both bosses at the time and future cooperators. Brusca was told by Provenzano that Eladdo was suspected of being an informant. He also said that 2 weeks prior to the murder, Aurelio Quattroloni, boss of Catania, came looking for him in Canatella, where he was staying as a fugitive, and told him that he received orders from prison to kill Luigi Eladdo. The person in prison he was speaking about was Eladdo's cousin, Giuseppe Madonia, who was considered a prime instigator in his murder. In the letter to Giuffre, Provenzano told him to take charge of the Eladdo problem. However, the murder was actually carried out by the Santapalo family as a favor for Madonia. More crucially, a day before his death, Eladdo was supposed to provide authorities with information regarding sensational mafia murders, like Falcone's and Borsellino's. Luigi Eladdo was 5 days away from entering Italy's protection program.